We live in a world that is constantly trying to feed us something, an opinion, a product, a distraction. And in the middle of all that noise, maybe the most radical thing you can do is just be intentional about what you let in. So today, we're going to dig into the critical importance of watching what we consume, both physically and spiritually.
And we're going to start with a really powerful story about conviction, set deep in the heart of an ancient empire. Believe it or not, this one decision made by a teenager actually holds a blueprint for how we can thrive in a culture that's always trying to get us to compromise. Okay, so to really get the weight of Daniel's choice, we first have to understand the world he was thrown into, a world that was basically designed to erase everything he knew and believed. So the story kicks off around 605 BC. Jerusalem is under siege, and the Babylonian Empire has this brilliant but ruthless strategy. They take the best and brightest young men, we're talking teenagers here, and carry them off into exile. They're then enrolled in this intense 3-year program meant to totally remake them into loyal servants of the king. I mean, can you imagine being ripped from your home and thrown into that? And you can just feel the pressure they were under. This wasn't a friendly exchange program. The empire's strategy was total assimilation. Their Hebrew names, which connected them to their god, were replaced with Babylonian ones. They were forced to learn a new language, new customs, and the goal was pretty simple: get them to trade their entire identity for a fancy seat at the king's table. But this is where it gets interesting. This is where Daniel makes a choice that's going to define his entire future. And he doesn't do it with some big, loud protest. He does it with a quiet but rock-solid conviction.
Let's zoom in on this one word, defile. It's key. For Daniel, the king's food wasn't just about nutrition. See, this food was most likely dedicated to pagan idols, and it probably included things that God's law explicitly forbade. So for him, eating it wasn't just a meal, it was a deep spiritual compromise. It was a line he wasn't willing to cross.
So instead of throwing a fit or starting a rebellion, Daniel does something incredibly wise. He respectfully goes to his handler and negotiates a simple test, just 10 days. He basically says, look, you guys can have the rich royal food and wine from the king's pagan table. Just give us vegetables and water, food that is pure, and let's see what happens. His goal wasn't to blend in, it was to stay set apart. And the results? They were absolutely staggering. Not only did they look healthier after just 10 days, but by the time their 3 years of training were up, God had honored their commitment in this massive way. They were brought before the king and were found to be, get this, 10 times wiser and more capable than all of the king's other magicians and advisors. So what's the big idea here? It's this: their faithfulness in a small, private choice, something as simple as what they decided to eat, unlocked this incredible future of public favor and massive impact. That private discipline literally became their public platform. Now, let's see how this idea keeps showing up. We're going to fast forward a few hundred years to the New Testament, where the Apostle Paul gives some strikingly similar advice to a young leader he's mentoring named Timothy. Paul kind of breaks it down like a return on investment. He says, hey, physical training, hitting the gym, that's good. It has some value, right, for this life? But training for godliness, working out your spirit, well, that has value for all things. It holds promise not just for this life, but for the one to come. Talk about an eternal investment. And the takeaway here is so powerful. You don't accidentally get spiritually fit any more than you accidentally run a marathon. You don't just drift into godliness. It's not a passive thing. It takes intentional discipline. It takes repetition. You actually have to train for it. All right, so how does all this ancient wisdom about Babylonian food and Roman philosophy actually connect to our lives right here, right now?
Well, it should sound really familiar, because we also live in a culture that is constantly feeding us stuff. The menu might have changed a little bit, but the goal of assimilation, of getting us to conform, it's exactly the same.
Our world offers us a constant buffet of physical junk food. Things that taste amazing in the moment, that give you that instant hit, but in the long run, they just leave you weak and sluggish. And then there's the junk media. We're fed this endless diet of entertainment that's literally designed to be addictive, to clutter up our minds and make it harder to think clearly and deeply about what really matters. And of course, there's social media. We consume this non-stop stream of outrage, gossip, and comparison that just poisons our peace and completely steals our joy. And on top of all that, we're constantly pressured to swallow toxic ideas and opinions that go directly against what we believe in, just so we can fit in or, not rock the boat. You see, what we consume eventually consumes us. It's just true. So if we feel spiritually sluggish or anxious or weak, maybe it's time to take a hard look at our diet, both what we're eating and what we're watching and listening to. Because the problem isn't always something out there. A lot of the time, it's the result of our own choices. Now look, this isn't about creating a giant list of new rules or becoming super legalistic. Not at all. This is simply about living with intention. It's about choosing to consume things that build the future you actually want, instead of things that are slowly destroying it. So what can we actually do? Well, here's a practical plan. First, just audit your consumption. For a week, be brutally honest and track what you're letting in. Second, set one simple boundary. Don't try to change everything at once. Just pick one area and practice a little self-control. Third, think long-term. Ask yourself, if I keep these habits up, where will I be in 5 years? Fourth, train both your body and your spirit. They're connected, so don't neglect one for the other. And finally, just be faithful in those small, private things. Trust that those little choices, like Daniel's, will be honored in big ways. Let's just wrap up with Daniel's wisdom. Remember, the king's food was free. It was the best in the entire kingdom, and everybody else was eating it. But Daniel understood its true cost. Just because something is available or popular or looks amazing doesn't mean it's actually good for you. And that leaves us with one powerful question to carry with us this week. As you go about your day and you see all the things our culture is offering, just ask yourself this: what in my life looks good right now, but isn't actually what's best for me? Answering that question honestly, well, that's the first step to living a more intentional and ultimately a more fulfilling life.